According to reports, the Biden administration has delayed a munitions supply to Israel in order to send a political message. Now, remember last week, the Congress approved a supplemental funding bill that provided funds for Ukraine, for Israel, and for Taiwan. Now, the driving force for that among the Republicans in the House weren't big on Ukraine, was to get much needed support to Israel. Now, when Iran attacked Israel, it's estimated somewhere between $500 and $750 million in munitions were expended in the Iron Dome and David Sling. Well, the political reporting that the Biden administration is slowing this down, but members of Congress are responding. Joining me now to discuss this is Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas. He serves on 4 Senate committees, including the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Dr. Marshall, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Tony, always great to be with you.
So, Senator, you have written to the president asking for answers and whether or not these reports are true. What have you found out?
Well, Tony, of course, nothing so far, except that we continue to get confirmation that indeed the president is not sending Israel the weapons that Congress approved. You know, to your point earlier, many Republicans voted for this big funding bill because of the Israel funding. I still couldn't get there because we hadn't secured our border yet. So Joe Biden does another bait and switch on us. He tricks people into voting for his Ukraine funding, and then most likely he's diverting these weapons for Israel to Ukraine. And it just coincidentally coincides with Israel, ramping up their attack on Rafah as well, which I think, is more than just a coincidence.
So this is in part, as I hear you saying, to put pressure on Israel to come to the conclusion that the Biden administration wants Israel, and that is basically to walk away from Gaza, allowing Hamas to continue. Is it also playing electoral politics by playing to their base here in the United States, this pro-Hamas base that is increasingly becoming vocal in the Democratic Party?
No doubt about it that Joe Biden is losing in all the major swing states, including Michigan. There is a large pro-Palestinian group up there that he is trying to cater to. There's no doubt that this is part of the equation. This has been a tough needle to thread for Joe Biden and Democrats. We've seen them abandoning Israel to appease that group of folks up in Michigan. At the same time, his policy of appeasement has led to just worse crisis after worse crisis. This would have all been over at least 2 months ago if Joe Biden hadn't pushed back so hard on Israel. These protests would have never happened on campuses. If we had a strong leader in the White House, this would have been over months ago, if it ever would have happened.
So, Senator Marshall, I ask you this question because this is what's on the minds, I think, of most of our viewers and listeners. Congress allocated this money. We're always told that Congress has the purse strings. So they've allocated this money for the sole purpose of standing with our ally Israel. What can Congress do to make sure that the Biden administration does what Congress allocated money for it to do?
Look, we'll need an inspector general to file some type of report and then try to get that through the court system. And the Supreme Court may have to weigh in here as well. But I think most importantly is we can bring it to the attention of the American people that this White House has a total disregard for the law, for law and order. He's proven over and over again that he does unconstitutional things, even after the Supreme Court says, don't do this forgiveness of student loans. And ultimately, that we, the people, have the final say of this just 6 months from now in November.
Yeah, this is as difficult as it was, as you pointed out, to get Republicans to come to a place to vote for this measure that $95 billion that funded Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, for the administration to basically do a bait and switch, to lie about it and not do what they asked Congress to fund. I don't see how the Congress could ever vote for anything else from this administration.
Yeah, Tony, again, I just encourage people to not pay attention to what Joe Biden says. Watch what he does. This morning, he's mourning the Holocaust situation, but at the same time, he's diverting weapons away from Israel to help them. At the same time, he's pro-Iran. You and I both know in this world in the Middle East, you cannot be pro-Iran and pro-Israel. Iran is the country that says death to America, death to Israel. God has called us to stand with the people of Israel. And that's certainly where my stance is. I think we have a spiritual meaning in this, a spiritual reason to stand beside the people of Israel. They are God's chosen people. Scripture tells us to stand by them. Joe Biden says one thing, but then he funds Iran, which leads to the funding of Hamas and all these other anti-Israel terrorist groups.
You're absolutely right. Senator Roger Marshall, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us today. It's always great to talk with you.
Thank you, Tony.